Liza Taylor Smith. Background. Of all the socially awkward behaviors I exhibited during my transition from homeschool to public school in ninth grade, perhaps the most outrageous was my decision to memorize everyone in the eighth grade yearbook so I could greet all my classmates by name on the first day of school. And of all those faces I memorized, perhaps the one I was most looking forward to acquainting myself with in real life was that of Liza Taylor Smith. In her yearbook photo, she had seductively droopy eyelids that reminded me of old photos I'd seen of Marilyn Monroe. These eyes were counterbalanced by a friendly smile. The smile was warm enough to suggest that, despite her beauty, she would be kind to any member of the male species who might show an interest in her, including even dorky former homeschoolers with one leg. Liza Taylor Smith. I loved how, unlike everyone else, she had not two, but three words in her name. As if her hotness could not be described by or contained within the confines of a normal name structure. Was Taylor a second first name? If so, why wasn't it hyphenated? Like Liza Taylor. So many questions. We would obviously have a lot to talk about when we finally met on the first day of school. When people think of homeschooling, they often picture a kid sitting at a desk in the kitchen, the mother teaching multiplication tables by scribbling numbers on a blackboard magnetized to the refrigerator. There are plenty of approaches to homeschooling, and people homeschool for many different reasons, but ours functioned less like a one student classroom and more like an independent study. At the start of the school year, Mom would give me my textbooks, one for each subject. She would divide the number of pages by the number of days in the school year, and those would be my daily reading requirements. That was basically it, so I learned to be self motivated. In elementary school, I would get up at 7 a.m. and not come out of my room for breakfast until I was finished with all my schoolwork for the day. That's why, when I was approaching my first day of public school, my natural inclination was to borrow a yearbook from one of my friends at church and start memorizing the facts, because that's what I knew how to do. It had always been my approach to school: read, memorize, repeat. Back in elementary school, during the finish all the work before breakfast days, homeschooling seemed so much better than traditional school. By the time Tony got home at 4 in the afternoon, I'd already been building forts in the bushes for 6 hours. Then I hit middle school, and my friends in the neighborhood started telling me about the glorious adventures they were having at public school: PE class, dances, pretty girls, everywhere. Suddenly, homeschooling didn't seem so fun anymore. Mom and dad weren't so excited about the idea. Christian school, maybe, but public school? It was a well known fact among Christian homeschoolers that public schools were bastions of gangs, drugs, teen pregnancy, rap music, pop culture, secular humanism, witchcraft, and body piercings. Mom, Dad, and I would sit around our smooth laminate kitchen table after dinner, arguing about whether I should be allowed to attend public school starting in ninth grade. Joshua, if you go to public school, Dad lowered his voice in case Matthew or Luke was listening from the family room. English teacher might ask you to read pornographic novels. I was very curious to know what exactly a pornographic novel was, but decided it was better not to ask. And you'll probably be invited to join a gang, he added. In your first week, said Mom. Don't worry. I'll be sure to wait until offers come in from all the gangs before I make my final decision. Mom's face dropped. I'm kidding. Look, I'm not going to join a gang, obviously. They will peer pressure you, said Mom. This I did not doubt, nor did I doubt that there were gangs or that I would be asked to join one. These were facts that homeschoolers like me took for granted. The Pope is Catholic. Bears poop in the woods. Public school kids are in gangs that do drugs. But to me, the benefits outweighed those risks. I can resist peer pressure, but in homeschool, I don't have the opportunities I would at regular school. I really think God wants me there. Also, I wanted to go to public school. I wanted to be on the newspaper staff, to attend school dances, to meet hundreds of pretty girls. But for my parents, what God wanted was more important than what I wanted. And God was more difficult to argue with since he wasn't sitting at the table with us. So I played the God card whenever I could. We'll pray more about it, said Dad. Eventually, and after much more prayer, Dad joined mine God's side, and Mom was outvoted. Having been indoctrinated my entire life about the dangers of public school, I walked through the heavy doors on my first day, feeling how I imagined an American spy would feel upon entering a terrorist training camp for 4 years of deep undercover work. I had a panicky fear in my chest that was screaming, "You do not belong here! You're going to say the wrong thing! Your whole..." Before first period, I glanced quickly in the locker below mine as a student opened it. He was a few grades older than me, so I didn't feel confident saying hi to him. But he lived in my neighborhood, and I knew who he was. Anyway, I looked into his locker for the sole purpose of finding out which area he was using to stash his drugs and weapons. Not to determine whether he had drugs and weapons, mind you, but merely to determine where they were, because there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that he, like most students of public school, hid both drugs and weapons in his locker. Though I was intimidated, I had made up my mind that I would try to befriend as many of my fellow freshmen as possible, and it would be easy since I already knew who they were. As I walked down the hall, I called out their names and waved at students I recognized from the yearbook. I'd spent so long looking at their photos that they had become like celebrities to me. School hallway was like a red carpet before the Academy Awards. I shouted first and last names with glee, waving frantically, getting that "OMG, a celebrity just waved back at me" rush whenever my greeting was returned. I scanned the halls most earnestly for that one particular face, that perfect face with the droopy eyelids and inviting smile, the face of Liza Taylor Smith. But I didn't see her en route to first period. As I said, it felt like I was going undercover, not only because I was new to public school, but also because I was an amputee wearing a prosthesis, a device that is made to look like something other than what it really is. There's a deception there, and as with all deception, the implicit mission is to keep the secret, to not let anyone find out. I wore long, long shorts, so long you might think they were pants, exposing just a few inches of ankle in between my shoe and the shorts. My artificial leg was covered in foam, molded to the shape of my real leg, and that foam was covered in a rubber skin matched to my real skin tone. I wasn't too far along in puberty yet, so there wasn't enough hair on my right leg to make the shins look mismatched. To the casual onlooker who passed me in the hall, I reminded myself with every step my leg would look real. No one could tell. No one would know. My secret was safe. Yet, despite my very best efforts to walk smoothly, when you have an artificial hip, knee, and ankle joint on one side, you're always going to have at least a slight limp. An upperclassman stuck out his leg in front of my feet as I walked by him on my way to lunch. I tripped, letting my books fly as I put out my arms to break my fall. His friends laughed. "You ain't no pimp, so don't try and walk like one," he yelled, exchanging celebratory high fives with his entourage. I lifted myself up to a push up position and rolled my weight onto my real foot so my prosthetic knee straightened out behind me. Then I brought my real foot between my hands so I was positioned like a sprinter before a race. Pressing from the muscles in my real leg, my fake one, of course, provided no assistance in these situations. I stood up, not to face him. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the ground, bending over to pick up my books, feeling my lower lip quiver. I made a quick glance around the hallway. Had Liza Taylor Smith seen this? That would be just my luck. But no, fortunately, she was not around. She did not see me fall. This incident would remain a secret from her. As for the people who had seen it happen, there was no way to tell if they had figured out I had a prosthesis. I put my head back down and kept walking. Later that first day, I had honors biology class, where the teacher, Mr. Glick, taught us about the 9 phyla of the animal kingdom. As he spoke, I saw other students jotting down the names of the phyla in their notebooks, but I had never had to listen to someone and write down what they were saying. At the same time, before, I had always learned from reading books in my bedroom, so I didn't take any notes. On the second day of honors biology, Mr. Glick said, "Take out a sheet of paper for..." He literally paused for dramatic effect. "Our pop quiz!" Around the room, there were several audible gasps. 3 ring binders were snapped open to slide out notebook paper. At other desks, sheets of paper were torn out of spiral bound notebooks with the zip. I clicked open my own 3 ring binder and pulled out a sheet, and the paper shaking in my hand as I set it on my desk. I was thinking, a pop quiz? What is this? What's going on? Why didn't he tell us about it ahead of time? "Please close your notebooks and textbooks. At the top of your paper, write your name." I wrote my name slowly, doing my best to keep my pen from shaking. "Now, Write down the nine phyla in the animal kingdom. I was screwed. I had not taken any notes. I had not listened carefully. I had not known it was important or, for that matter, even known how to learn that way. It was so unfair. A pop quiz with no advance warning. Public school was a ripoff. I was going to fail out and not get into college and end up destitute and living on the streets. Finally, one of the phyla popped into my mind. I remembered it because it was a cool sounding word. Nematode. I thought some more, and two additional words from the lesson added themselves, shakily, to my handwritten list. Arthropod, mollusk. After that, nothing. I sat there, pen unsteady, breathing shallow, struggling to recall anything else I'd heard Mr. Glick say. I thought about animals I'd seen at the zoo, at the aquarium. I knew plenty of animal names, but not their phyla. Pencils down, please. And just like that, the quiz was over. With only 3 out of 9 answers on my paper, my best possible score was a 33%. My life was headed for ruin. A few weeks later, Mr. Glick would reveal that the pop quiz did not count toward the final grade. It was just a lesson, he said, on the importance of taking notes and reviewing them before class. Well, Mr. Glick, lesson learned. I started taking notes after that quiz. Never again did I score so low on a quiz or test. But the most significant event for me romantically on that first day was what didn't happen. I did not meet Liza Taylor Smith. After school let out, I was talking to two guys I knew from the yearbook, Ryan Eckhart and Craig Johansson, while also looking around for Liza Taylor Smith. Was she out here on the sidewalk anywhere? Maybe she had gotten a haircut. Maybe she didn't look like she did in her yearbook photo, and that's why I hadn't recognized her. Question, I said to Ryan. One person I haven't met yet is Liza Taylor Smith. You know her? Liza Taylor? Of course, hottest girl in our class. I nodded. So, is she nearby anywhere? Do you see her? Ryan searched the groups of students. No, she's not here. Bummer. I really want to meet her. Yeah, just watch for a big group of guys who are all trying to talk to her. She'll be right in the middle. Craig added, or look for the girl with really big, you know. He cupped his hands in front of his chest, and I realized he was talking about Liza Taylor Smith's breast. I was shocked. I had never, ever discussed any girl's breast before. To hear this guy talk about, well, female anatomy so openly, without even lowering his voice, as if he didn't care if anyone overheard him, made me tense up uncomfortably. I left Ryan and Craig and talked with a few other groups of students, mostly girls, none of whom included Liza Taylor Smith or her apparently noteworthy breast. Finally, Mom pulled up to the curb. Later, at dinner, when I told her about the kid who had tripped me, she started crying. Public school was everything she had been afraid it would be. After a week had passed, and I still had not been offered drugs or gang membership, nor had I seen a single weapon fall out of a locker or a backpack, I started to wonder if maybe homeschoolers were wrong about some aspects of public school. Because actually, most of the students I'd met had been pretty nice. Public school students were, for the most part, nice people who were very similar to me, other than the fact that they had 2 legs and talked about girls' breasts. That was the good news. The bad news was that I still had not crossed paths with Liza Taylor Smith. I realized we must have had different walking routes between classes, which wasn't that surprising. Our school was an enormous web of interconnected wings, hallways, and stairwells that crisscrossed like highway overpasses. So I started varying my routes between my locker and class, trying to increase the likelihood I would bump into her. Whenever I was in a crowd, like at lunch or outside after school, I would ask around to see if anyone had seen Liza Taylor Smith nearby. After 2 weeks of this, I had pretty much given up hope that we would ever meet. That's when I received the letter. It was handed to me by Lauren Baker, a well known member of Liza Taylor Smith's entourage, who happened to sit beside me in Spanish. Lauren was a pretty, aloof girl who generally deemed me worthy of only a slight smile and nod when I said hi to her. That was one thing I had learned about public school. It was a place with places, a well defined social hierarchy in which everyone knew his or her status. That was weird to me. I'd been taught not to buy into stereotypes because stereotypes are shallow and untrue and everything. But all the high school stereotypes you hear about in popular culture seem to be true at Harrisonburg High School. The quarterback of the football team dated the cheerleading captain. Guys with sports cars had hot girlfriends. The really, really smart students wore glasses and had acne. As this picture of social structure had become clearer in my mind, my fantasies about hitting it off with Liza Taylor Smith had grown dimmer. From what I could tell, she sat atop the very pinnacle of popularity in our grade. She was a cheerleader. She was hot. She had certain characteristics the other guys liked to talk about. Need I say more? Me? Well, I didn't really know where I fit in. I didn't have an established clique of friends like everyone else. I knew everyone's name, and people seemed to like me fine, but I sat at a different lunch table every day, rotating around the room like I was trying to win a musical chairs tournament. After school, I floated in and out of circles of students as they stood on the sidewalk, waiting for their rides. I didn't have a place, and therefore, I didn't have the status to impress someone like Liza Taylor Smith. Here, said Lauren Baker, dropping the note on my desk. We were getting up to leave Spanish class at the end of the period. I raised my eyebrows, confused. She nodded her head at the note as if to say, I am leaving this with you, but you deserve no further explanation from me concerning its contents. Read it for yourself. I looked down at what was lying on my desk. Based on its dimensions, slightly larger than a credit card, about a centimeter tall, I guessed it was a standard sized sheet of notebook paper that had been folded once, twice, and then thrice. On the face up side was written a single word in light blue glitter gel ink: Josh. I swiped the note off my desk and stuffed it in the front pocket of my capri length shorts. As I walked to my locker between Spanish and honors biology, I wondered what could be written in this note. I had never been given a note at school before, let alone a note from a girl like Lauren Baker, who was both hot and popular. What could it possibly say? What would she have to tell me that was so important it had to be passed? Quietly, almost secretly, in a folded sheet of notebook paper, with my name written on it. I waited to read the note until after I had gotten home from school. I didn't want to read it in public in case its contents turned out to be, emotionally disturbing or something. I went into my bedroom and shut the door, then sat down at my desk, unfolding the piece of paper one crease at a time, my hands shaking almost as much as they had when Mr. Glick popped that quiz. Sparkly blue handwriting took up the entire page. I scanned to the end, expecting to see a signature that said Lauren. After all, Lauren Baker was the one who had handed me the note. She must have written it too, right? But no, it said no such thing. In fact, there was not one, but two names written at the end of the letter: Liza Taylor. Liza Taylor had written me a letter? Me? Josh Sundquist? There was no way this was real. It was too good to be true. I looked up from my desk and out the window, and then at the door, as if I expected someone to jump out and say that I had been pranked. But the door remained closed, and my room remained quiet. I took a deep breath and dove into the note, savoring each word, each sparkly handwritten letter. Dear Josh, it began. As I read, my mind kept interrupting me with screams of, Is this really happening? The letter went on to explain that she knew we had not met yet. Seriously? She knows who I am? But that she was really looking forward to meeting me because, see, her Bible study leader from Young Life had told her all about me, about how I had been diagnosed with cancer as a child, how I had lost my leg. Wait, what? She already knows my secret? All hope is lost. Her Bible study leader also told her how my faith in God had gotten me through such a difficult time, and how that faith continues to sustain me today. Liza Taylor concluded by saying she was inspired and impressed by my faith, and it just really encouraged her to know that, like another one of her classmates, had such a great relationship with God. She hoped we would be able to meet soon. It was signed simply Liza Taylor. I read the entire note again and again, soaking up every word. It was like taking a shower under drops of bliss. All the happiness washed over me, soaking through to the bone. Liza Taylor had written me. She wanted to meet me. She was impressed. Not only that, but she already knew that I had one leg. which I was a little weirded out to discover since most people at school didn't know yet. And even with this knowledge, she still wanted to meet me. My disability did not reduce her opinion of me. In fact, based on the note, it seemed like it actually made her think more highly of me. That Liza Taylor was in a Bible study with it was itself a shocking development. Liza Taylor Smith was a Christian, just like me, which meant I could date her. She could be my first real girlfriend. No sooner had the thought entered my mind, however, than the rule returned to smack me in the face. No dating until you're 16 years old. Mom and Dad had made an exception and allowed me to date Sarah Stevens because she was a family friend. They knew her. She and I had grown up together, but they didn't know Liza Taylor Smith. That she was in a Bible study would not be enough to convince them. To Mom and Dad, she was just some random girl from public school, meaning she was most likely a corrupting seductress or closet Wiccan. Bible study member or not. I sighed and stared out the window. I was so close. So close to not only meeting Liza Taylor Smith, but dating her. I mean, it said it right there in the letter. She wanted to meet me. That's when I got an idea. I might not be allowed to go on dates, plural, but maybe I could persuade mom and dad to let me go on just one, specifically to the homecoming dance. It was coming up in a couple of weeks, and since homecoming was a special occasion, closely supervised by chaperones, maybe they'd make an exception to the no dating rule and let me attend. I suggested as much at dinner, and they agreed to pray about it. That was a start, at least. The next evening, I brought it up again. So, what about homecoming? We can discuss it after dinner, said Dad. I was eager to hear their answer. Why not now? Mom and Dad glanced at each other. Not in front of your younger brothers, said Dad, nodding at Matthew and Luke. It wasn't until dinner had been finished, the dishes cleared, and my brothers ushered safely out of earshot into the family room with the door closed, that I got my answer. Dad began, I'm sorry, Joshua, but we have decided not to make an exception. My shoulders slumped and I let out an exasperated sigh. To our rule, you're not allowed to date until you're 16, and that includes school dances. Why does it matter? It's just a dance. I can ask some girl. Obviously, I would not be asking some girl. No, I'm going to ask a very specific girl with 3 words in her name. But no use telling mom and dad that. As a friend, we just don't think it's safe, mom said. Safe? Like I'm going to pull a muscle while dancing? No, she looked uncomfortable. What then? Dad jumped in. We've heard that a lot of girls get, I raised my eyebrows. Well, Dad was struggling. Yes, pregnant. At the homecoming dance, that is. Mom's eyelids widened slightly at the mere mention of the P word, the ultimate embarrassment for any Christian parent, a sin that brought irreversible shame upon any good church going family. Oh, come on, I said. Pregnant? You think I'm going to have sex at the dance? Keep your voice down, please, said Mom, nodding her head at the door to the family room. No, we do not think you will, but we don't want to put you in a place of temptation either. A place of temptation? Dad, there are going to be like hundreds of kids there. How could I possibly get someone pregnant? Well, maybe before or after. I can't drive. You're going to have to drive me to pick her up and drop her off anyway. In between that, we'll be at a dance chaperoned by like an army of teachers and parents. True, Dad conceded. I guess you will be supervised. Mom gave him a look. But that doesn't change the fact that you aren't allowed to go, added Dad, returning his tone from thoughtful back to this is our final decision. Dad, this is completely absurd. I directed my arguments at Dad because he was the less strict one. If someone budged, it would be him, not Mom. You were the one who explained to me where babies come from, remember? I don't recall learning about anything about babies coming from people dancing. It's not going to just accidentally happen at the dance. Joshua, you are too young to understand, but hormones can be very powerful. Explain it. Explain to me how my date could get pregnant. Teenagers with hormones can be very creative. I don't know exactly. Maybe in a classroom or something, you sneak off with your date. Are you being serious right now? This isn't a joke. Dad put his hand up in a stop sign. That's enough. Our decision is final. Ugh, you guys are ridiculous. I pulled my chair from the table as violently as I could and hopped over to my crutches, which were leaning against the wall. I stormed out of the room and went to my bedroom and slammed the door. Sliding open my nightstand drawer, I lifted out the note from Liza Taylor. Then I crumpled it up and threw it on the floor. A few days later, I had to miss homecoming. I was standing outside at the end of the school day, waiting for Mom to pick me up, when I was approached by a college-age guy wearing a trucker hat and cowboy shirt. "What's up, bro?" he said, offering a fist bump. "What's your name?" "I'm Josh." "Word, they call me Miller." "Nice to meet you. So listen, you should come out to club tonight." He handed me a photocopied flyer. "It's gonna be mad fun." "Cool, thanks." He walked away to find his next target. I examined the flyer. It was a hand-drawn map to someone's house that read Young Life Club, 7 p.m. My mind pinged, alerting me to a connection between this flyer and Liza Taylor Smith. What was the connection? I thought for a second. Oh, yeah, her note. She had said she heard about me from her Young Life leader. Bingo! My chance to finally meet Liza Taylor had literally just been handed to me. I'd never been to Young Life, but I'd heard of it. It was a Christian organization, sort of a youth group for public schools, led by local college students and other volunteers. The religious affiliation made it an easy sell to Mom and Dad. That night, Dad dropped me off at the address on Miller's map. I got out of the van and spotted Liza Taylor almost instantly. As promised, she was holding court with a circle of guys, all upperclassmen, all football players. I didn't want to interrupt, so instead of butting into the circle, I perched politely just behind Liza Taylor and waited to see if she would notice me. I guess she eventually felt my breath on her neck or something, and she turned around to face me. I didn't say anything, just waited for her to place me. "You're Joshua Sundquist." "Yep, I'm Liza Taylor." "I know." "This is so cool. I didn't know you came to Young Life." "It's my first time." "Well, I'm so glad you're here." Then, silence. We were nearing the point at which a conversational pause turns into awkwardness, when the door to the basement burst open and Miller stepped out. "Everyone inside!" he bellowed. "Okay, maybe I'll talk to you after club," Liza Taylor offered. "Yeah, okay, cool," I concurred. Everyone funneled through the door into the basement. The furniture had been cleared out to provide ample floor seating. Everyone was gathering on the carpet with their group of friends. Not having a crew of my own, I sat alone behind the farthest row in the back of the room. There's a big difference between knowing everyone's name and having a group of friends that counts you as one of its members. Sitting on the floor with a prosthesis like mine is a little awkward. The hip joint doesn't rotate in, so you can't sit cross legged as most people would in a crowded situation like this. You have to sort of recline, legs out in front of you, palms planted behind you. So you take up a conspicuous amount of floor space, which is especially annoying when you want to be invisible so no one notices that you're sitting by yourself. Miller jumped up in front of the room. "Sup, club?" he screamed, drawing wild applause. He high-fived a few people in the front row. "I thought we'd start off tonight with a little competition." The promise of competition elicited another round of cheering. "In honor of the fall holiday known as Thanksgiving, aka Turkey Day, we're gonna have a pumpkin race." Although I wasn't sure what a pumpkin race was, just the word race gave me an instant flashback to my childhood. When I was 7, I won a blue ribbon in the homeschool science fair for an experiment in which I proved that sprinting at my top speed, which the judges agreed, based on the data I had recorded, was indeed very fast, increased my heart rate compared to when I was walking. I loved to run races back when I had 2 legs. "Here's how it works. In a minute, we're going to go back outside, and 3 competitors will line up at the starting line. They'll run out and around the big tree in the front yard. First one across the finish line wins. Oh, yeah, and they'll be wearing one of these on each foot." He produced a pumpkin from the floor in front of him and held it aloft with one hand. The crowd went crazy. Holding the stem of the pumpkin with his other hand, he lifted off a circular top section that had been pre-cut from the pumpkin and showed us the orangey innards through the hole. "You just take your shoe and sock off, and then—" He dropped the pumpkin stem and plunged that hand into the pumpkin. Put your foot right up in there. He removed his hand to show that it was covered up to his forearm with pumpkin seeds and bright orange strings of pumpkin guts. An ew, that's so gross laugh erupted in the basement. He set the pumpkin down. Now, tonight, before club started, three people came up to me and they were like, Miller, can I please be in tonight's competition? This drew a knowing laugh. He pulled a slip of paper out of his pocket. As he read each name, there was a smattering of applause. And Josh Sundquist! Liza Taylor, who was sitting in the front row, was one of the first to turn around and look at me. She smiled. I felt heat rising to my face. I wondered how Miller knew my last name. Maybe he had gotten it from Liza Taylor. Maybe from Liza Taylor's Bible study leader. But it didn't really matter how he had found out, because he had. That was over and done with. And now I had to deal with this impossibly uncomfortable situation. Other than Liza Taylor, none of my classmates knew I was missing a leg. If they had known, they would not be clapping. They would be wondering, as I was now, whether it was possible to do this competition with a prosthesis on. I considered it. I could take the shoe off my artificial leg, though doing so was quite difficult and usually required two hands or the use of a shoehorn. But even if I did get my shoe off, my ankle did not have enough forward flexion to fit through that hole in the top of the pumpkin. In the end, though, none of that mattered because I simply couldn't run with my prosthesis, pumpkin shoe or not, because the artificial leg didn't swing through fast enough. I sat still by myself on the floor while everyone made their way outside for the race. I was about to break both my rules. I was about to be a burden on Miller by telling him I couldn't compete, and I was going to identify myself as different when everyone started to wonder why I had dropped out. Outside, the other two competitors were already clad in their pumpkin footwear. I shuffled over to Miller. You ready to gourd up, bro? He asked. Yeah, that's what I need to talk to you about, I said. I leaned my head toward the street, indicating we should turn to face away from the group. I can't do it. Um, I have I have an artificial leg. I glanced down at my leg, which was covered with a pair of pants. Oh, bro, I'm so sorry, said Miller. He did indeed look really sorry, and not so much sympathetic sorry as, what have I done? Horrified sorry. It's all right. I lost it a long time ago. No, I'm sorry about calling you up for this raise. I had no idea. It's cool. Sorry I can't, you know, compete. If you want, you can be in another one of tonight's skits. Next, we're doing a competition where you put pantyhose over your head and have to eat a can of pumpkin pie filling through it. Can you do that? Can I eat pumpkin pie? This was why I didn't like for people to know I had a fake leg. Once they did, they assumed I wasn't able to do much of anything. Sure. I looked back at the other students, all of whom were monitoring my conversation with Miller. Had they figured out my secret? I searched for Liza Taylor Smith's face in the crowd, but I couldn't find it. After that night, I saw her on occasion at school, but everything had changed. It had become impossible to believe she could be interested in me, even in my most optimistic of daydreams. During our brief conversations in the hall at school, as I tried to maintain eye contact, fighting the visual gravity of her perfect body, I was distracted by my assumption that she was distracted. I was sure she must be replaying her memory of the Young Life meeting, thinking about how I couldn't participate in the pumpkin relay because my own body was irrevocably broken. Hypothesis. Subject may have held romantic attractions for me, as evidenced by handwritten correspondence written with sparkly pen. Further investigation is required to determine for certain. Investigation. Let's be honest here. I'd always been intimidated by Liza Taylor. I mean, even after I was finally allowed to date girls when I was 16, I never asked her out. Why? She seemed out of my league. Sure, I still saw her around at school from time to time, but after I had gotten into the swing of things at public school, after I understood the social hierarchy and where I fit in it, I never considered dating her. So, how could I ask her to have coffee with me 10 years later, even if the reasons were entirely scientific? Even if I merely wanted to determine whether she had had any interest in me back in freshman year? Even if I just wanted to clear things up for myself, to get the story of my life all straightened out? But fate intervened. I went to the mall to do some last minute Christmas shopping, and I happened to run into her in front of Bath and Body Works. Even as we hugged, The artificial chemical based reproduction of mountain breezes and ocean mist wafting in through my nostrils. I felt my blood filling up with adrenaline. To compensate for my nervousness, which can often lead to side effects like stuttering and or looking down at the ground, I overcorrected with way too much enthusiasm. Man, I can't believe we just ran into each other like this. Yeah, crazy. I haven't seen you since high school graduation. Each of my sentences ended in an exclamation mark. Yeah, I guess you're right. She had the same droopy eyelids, the same inviting smile. My mind was going a million miles a minute, racing through the questions I had for her, the things I've always wanted to know. Why did she write me that note? Did she have a crush on me? Was she disappointed I never asked her out? I made an attempt to turn the conversation in the direction of my investigation. I always look back on high school and wish I'd spend more time with you. Time hanging out with you, I said. You were one of the coolest people in our grade. Oh, thanks, she said in a tone like she was embarrassed. But she wasn't blushing. It was only an act, a well trained response to compliments by a girl who got them all the time. Either that or I was just making her uncomfortable. Whatever, I had to take the risk. I had to find out if she had liked me. So I pushed the conversation to the breaking point. Certainly, I added, with all the sincerity I could muster to compensate for the cheesiness of what I was about to say. You were one of the most beautiful girls in our grade. Well, thanks, she said, actually blushing this time. I clenched up, hoping against all odds that she would respond with something about how I was super cute too. And remember that note she wrote me? She totally had a crush on me back in high school. And what was I doing tonight for dinner? You were certainly, she struggled for words, one of the most interesting guys in our grade. The word interesting came out of her mouth so slowly and carefully, it sounded like the screech of nails on chalkboard. It was shudder inducing. The best word in her vocabulary to describe me was interesting. Interesting is the word you use to describe the color of month old Chinese takeout noodles in your refrigerator. It's the word you use to describe your super weird aunt and uncle who live in a bomb proof nuclear fallout shelter with a stash of automatic weapons and a 20-year supply of canned goods. I briefly considered asking her about the note, asking her why she had written it if I had been merely interesting. But I realized that if this was how she felt about me, she wouldn't even remember the note. I mean, let's be honest, a girl writes hundreds of notes during her high school career. She only remembers a few of them once she's an adult. But the ones she remembers are certainly not those written to boys she found interesting. There was nothing else to discover here. That one word answered all my questions. Okay, well, cool. Nice to see you, I said, faking a smile. You too. And we walked our separate ways, annoying ding-a-ling holiday music echoing all around